I'm sure you're as hyped for Season 8 of Game of Thrones as I am, which is probably why you're watching this video right now. Whether you want a quick recap before the final chapter unfolds in April, or maybe you haven't watched any of the show before. If that's the case though, you should definitely change that. Either way, if you want a Game of Thrones recap before Season 8, then this is the video for you. However, Game of Thrones, the TV show based on George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire book series, which still isn't finished, is a very complicated epic, including a vast array of characters, all of whom have convoluted backstories and intricate relationships with each other. Subsequently, this is not going to be a fully in-depth recap, as that would literally take about 70 hours. The same amount of time it would take to just watch the whole show anyway. So strap yourself in, because we're going to be going through Season 1 all the way through to Season 7 for Game of Thrones, the story so far. The show is mainly set in the fantasy kingdom of Westeros. Noble families rule the 7 kingdoms of the land, with lots and lots of political battles. I'm not talking about Jeremy Corbyn versus Theresa May here. This is real insane stuff. In this land, seasons can last decades, and summer is slowly coming to an end. The first scene of the entire show opens with the Night's Watch, who are an ancient order who guard the wall, which is not just any wall, it's the biggest wall made out of ice that you could ever imagine, situated in the north of the kingdom. The Brothers of the Night's Watch discover one of their members has been killed and turns into a supernatural being known as a White Walker. At this point in time, White Walkers, aka the Others, have been thought to be a myth for decades. We're introduced to the Stark family, who have just found 5 direwolf puppies, one for each child to keep and grow up with. A little later in Winterfell, the ancestral home of the Stark family, situated in the north of the land, just below the wall, Lord Ned Stark is visited by his old friend, King Robert Baratheon. The king invites Ned down south to King's Landing to be his new Hand of the King, after the sudden death of Jon Arryn, the previous Hand. Ned's youngest son, Bran, enjoys climbing the castle walls and discovers the king's wife, Cersei, in bed with her twin brother, Jaime Lannister. The twins can't let their secret love be known, so Jaime pushes Bran from the tower window, leaving him a cripple. All of this happens in episode 1. Tyrion Lannister, dwarf and brother to Cersei and Jaime, accompanies Ned's bastard son, Jon Snow, to the wall to investigate the sighting of a White Walker. Jon stays on with the Night's Watch, making some friends and enemies along the way. Ned doesn't really want to leave his home and wife, but ever the man of honour, he accepts Baratheon's offer of becoming the Hand of the King. His 2 daughters, Sansa and Arya, travel down to the capital with him to find the city full of corruption and lies. Meanwhile, Tyrion is making the journey back down south from the wall when Catelyn Stark, Ned's wife, arrests him as she believes he is responsible for Bran's fall. Tyrion is imprisoned in the Vale, held captive by Catelyn's sister Lysa Arryn. Tyrion pays Bronn a sellsword to fight for him in a trial by combat to prove his innocence. Bronn defeats Lysa Arryn's champion and the two leave with their lives, quickly becoming fan favourites. Now in King's Landing, Ned quickly realises that Cersei Lannister is an excellent manipulator and deceiver. He figures out that Cersei was the cause of Jon Arryn's death, and she plans to murder her husband, the king, to take the throne for herself and her family, the Lannisters. When Robert Baratheon gets badly injured in a suspicious hunting accident, Ned is named Protector of the Realm, until Robert and Cersei's evil and twisted son Joffrey comes of age. Ned, on the other hand, plans to give the crown to Robert's estranged brother Stannis instead, as he figures out that Joffrey isn't actually Robert Baratheon's son. In the first huge shock of the series, Ned Stark is betrayed by council member Peter Littlefinger Baelish, as Cersei makes him out to be taking the throne away from Joffrey, the true heir. Ned is imprisoned and eventually decapitated on Joffrey's orders in front of his 2 daughters. Dick move, Joffrey, you Sansa is arrested by the Lannisters, however Arya manages to escape. In retaliation, Ned's eldest son Robb is named King in the North and rallies the armies of the North to avenge his father. We move away from Westeros now across the Narrow Sea to the army of the Dothraki, a race of savage, nomadic horse-mounted warriors. But more importantly to Daenerys Targaryen, whose family, the Targaryens, have a long history of ruling Westeros. She is married to Khal Drogo, one of the leaders of the Dothraki. However, Drogo dies after being tricked by a witch who promised to heal him after picking up a cut in battle. Daenerys avenges him, and we end Season 1 with her hatching 3 dragon eggs in a huge pyre, with the plan of launching an assault on Westeros to take the throne back for the Targaryens. Okay, seriously though, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones and you're watching this to try and catch up before Season 8, and this hasn't enticed you in, what? Anyway, on to Season 2. With Joffrey now king, Tyrion Lannister takes up the position of Hand of the King in an attempt to control his nephew's erratic behaviour. Stannis publicly lays claim to the throne on the basis of Joffrey's illegitimacy. Rumours are that Joffrey never was Baratheon's son at all, and Jaime Lannister is his actual father, something that Ned figured out in the last season before he was killed. However, Stannis falls under the spell of the Red Witch Melisandre and her religion of the Lord of the Light. She claims that Stannis is the one true king who has been prophesied to save all men. Robb's armies progress south, capturing Jaime Lannister as a prisoner of war. Robb sends his childhood friend Theon Greyjoy to go back to his home to seek alliance from his father, Balon Greyjoy. Side note, Theon was basically a hostage held by the Starks all his life, as the Starks didn't get along with the Greyjoys, although Ned basically let him live as one of his sons. Instead, Theon sides with his family and takes Winterfell by force while Robb is away, in an attempt to impress his father. Bran is aided to escape to the wilderness with everyone's favourite lovable dimwit, Hodor. He can only say Hodor, hence the name. Sansa gets to fulfill her lifelong dream of becoming a princess, but is horrified at how Joffrey abuses her. Perhaps being a princess isn't all it seemed. Stannis' younger brother Renly now chirps up, and puts his claim to the throne as him and Stannis don't see eye to eye. Robb sends Catelyn to speak to Renly to try and persuade him to join forces with Stannis so they can all storm King's Landing together to avenge Ned. Stubborn and naive, Renly refuses and is murdered by some kind of shadow monster at the order of Melisandre the Red Witch. Something Stannis didn't oppose. Renly's personal bodyguard, Brienne of Tarth, the female knight, now swears her allegiance to Catelyn Stark, and the two are accused of murdering Renly Baratheon because, obviously, no one would suspect a shadow monster evil spirit kind of thing, right? Arya is trying to get back to her family up north when she is captured by Lannister forces who, might I add, don't know who she is and believe her to be a boy. They take her to Harrenhal, where Tywin Lannister, Cersei, Jaime and Tyrion's father, and the true power of the Lannister family, is residing. After some interesting scenes with Tywin, Arya escapes the Lannisters with help from a mysterious figure named Jaqen H'ghar, a man from Essos who can change his face. What? Back with Daenerys now. The Khaleesi, aka Queen, and some of Khal Drogo's loyal men travel to Qarth to try and get support for her quest to Westeros. It doesn't really go to plan, and her dragons, still only small, are stolen. We don't know too much about Dany at this point, but she realises that being a queen may be harder than she first thought. Catelyn Stark, unknown to Robb, releases Jaime Lannister and sends him back to King's Landing by escort of Brienne of Tarth in hope of a trade to get Sansa back. Jon Snow and the Night's Watch travel north of the Wall on an expedition to Craster's Keep. Apart from being a completely horrible man, it is discovered that Craster is also sacrificing human babies to the others. Later, Jon is required to kill a wildling woman. Wildlings are a race of people who live freely north of the Wall. Stereotypically, the wildlings and the Night's Watch, and all men, south of the Wall for that matter, hate each other. Jon can't bring himself to kill Ygritte, and she escapes, only to capture him with her wildling friends later. Jon pretends to defect from the Night's Watch to join the wildlings to save his life, and try and learn their plans. To gain their trust, he is then forced to kill a Night's Watch ranger. Life hasn't been easy for Jon Snow so far. At the end of Season 2, in a brilliant episode, Stannis storms King's Landing by sea, but is eventually defeated due to Tyrion's cunning use of wildfire, saving the city and the Lannister reign. This is genuinely one of my favourite episodes of the TV series. One of, because there's so many. In Season 3, the all-powerful Tywin Lannister returns to King's Landing and takes up position of Hand of the King, demoting his son Tyrion. Tywin has always disliked Tyrion and blames him for the death of his wife, Joanna Lannister, as she died in childbirth. The only family member who has a soft spot for Tyrion is his brother Jaime. After Sansa has been mentally and physically tormented by Joffrey since Ned's death, Tywin orders Tyrion to marry Sansa, freeing her from the clutches of Joffrey, but still leaving her under Lannister control. Tyrion doesn't really want this marriage either, but does what he's told and treats Sansa with kindness. On the other hand, Joffrey is now betrothed to Margaery Tyrell, in hope of building a strong Lannister-Tyrell alliance. Margaery is very well liked by the people. Jon Snow, now with the Wildlings, earns the trust of the Wildling leader Mance Rayder. He learns that the Free Folk aim to climb the wall and force their way back into Westeros. Jon begins to develop feelings for the ginger wildling Ygritte. They have a fun time in a cave in the episode that we learn that Jon Snow knows nothing. The origin of the name of this channel, actually. Jaime and Brienne develop an interesting relationship of their own on their journey back south. They go from hating each other to having almost an admiration for one another. Unfortunately, they're captured by some Bolton soldiers, and Jaime loses his hand. Fans say that this moment is when Jaime's redemption arc begins, from being the villain in much of the first 2 seasons to a more likeable character. The two eventually make it back to King's Landing. Robb Stark, who is still doing well in winning lots of small battles, needs to pass his army through the Twins, where House Frey reside. Walder Frey is a 90-something-year-old horrible man who weds his young daughters and is very stuck in his ways. To allow Robb and his army through the Twins, he makes Robb promise to wed one of his daughters. Robb accepts, but falls for another woman on his journey. Back north of the Wall, Jon Snow is made to kill another innocent man to prove his loyalty to the wildlings. Being a man of honour, like his father, he refuses and is attacked by the Free Folk. Ygritte feels betrayed and shoots Jon with an arrow as he escapes back to Castle Black. One of Jon Snow's friends in the Night's Watch, Samwell Tarly, is escorting one of Craster's daughters back to Castle Black with her newborn baby when a White Walker comes for the child. Somehow, the tubby funster kills the White Walker, as he luckily had a dragonglass dagger on him, one of the only weapons that can damage the others. No one will believe what he's just done, but still, go Sam, woo! Walder Frey learns that Robb Stark has fallen for another woman and doesn't intend to honour his promise, and plots against Robb with the Lannisters and the Boltons. The Boltons are led by Roose Bolton, a family known for flaying their enemies. Pretty nasty stuff. The young Frey girl is to be wed to another, and the whole Stark family are invited as a gesture of goodwill. It's worth noting that Arya has almost made her way back to her family and is within touching distance of the twins at the time of the wedding. The wedding turns out to be a trap, and Robb and Catelyn, along with Robb's pregnant love, are butchered. The screen faded to black as I could see my face reflecting on the TV screen like an oh my god emoji. Arya arrives at the twins with her reluctant protector, the Hound, who quickly realises what is happening and the two flee, leaving Arya without her mother and father now. It's not really been a good 3 seasons for the Starks. Elsewhere, Bran Stark learns that he can walk into his direwolf, allowing him to move even as a cripple. And Daenerys Targaryen has acquired 8,000 unsullied soldiers in the east, the toughest war-proven soldiers thought to be alive. Season 3 was definitely a ride. In Season 4, Joffrey gets married to Margaery Tyrell in another Game of Thrones wedding. This one has to go better than the last one, right? Well, yes, it certainly does, if you, like every single viewer, hates Joffrey, as he is poisoned and chokes to death in front of his family. Sweet, sweet justice. But who poisoned the king? In the confusion that follows, Sansa escapes with the help from Littlefinger. Remember him? And she goes to her Aunt Lysa in the Vale. Tyrion, of course, is blamed by Cersei for murdering her beloved son and is imprisoned, pending a trial. The woman of the night who Tyrion has been seeing and falling for comes out with evidence against the dwarf, killing him inside. Tyrion repeats history and requests a trial by combat. Cersei announces her champion as the Mountain, the biggest and most fearsome warrior in the Seven Kingdoms. Naturally, Bronn declines Tyrion's offer of saving him for a second time, but an unlikely hero in the name of Oberyn Martell steps in to his defence. The Martells and Lannisters have a bad history, but Oberyn doesn't see Tyrion as a typical Lannister, and also wants to take revenge on the Mountain for previous wars. Oberyn takes down the Mountain with his skill with a spear and a couple of flips, but the Viper gets too cocky, and the Mountain swipes him to the floor and crushes his head in with his bare hands. Brutal stuff. Tyrion is sent back to prison, and Brienne of Tarth is sent on a quest to find Sansa by Jaime Lannister. There are a few weird scenes in the Vale with Littlefinger, Lysa Arryn and Sansa, with Mr. Baelish being pretty creepy towards both of the women. He plans to marry Lysa, however it turns out she is too crazy even for Littlefinger, as she gets jealous thinking that Peter likes Sansa more than her. Sansa, of course, wants none of this odd little love triangle. Eventually, Peter pushes Lysa through the infamous moon door to her death. Daenerys' dragons are growing now, and one has gotten in trouble for killing a farmer's sheep. We can see that at the rate the dragons are growing, they could become uncontrollable. Dany also learns that one of her most trusted advisors, and completely friend-zoned admirer, Jorah Mormont, was actually sent to keep an eye on her by Robert Baratheon in Season 1. Dany is enraged and exiles the skilled swordsman. We have a really touching scene between Jaime and Tyrion, and Jaime helps Tyrion to escape. On his way out though, Tyrion wanted to pay his father a final visit. He climbs up through a hidden passage of the tower to Tywin's chambers to find him on the toilet, with Shae, Tyrion's mistress, in Tywin's bed. Enraged and emotionally distraught, Tyrion strangles Shae with her necklace, before walking in on Tywin having a big dump. The two have a brief conversation until Tyrion shoots his father with a crossbow, releasing the decades of hurt his father had caused him. So we finally find out where the Lannisters really do shit gold. Tyrion flees King's Landing on a ship in hope of finding Daenerys Targaryen and joining her cause. He believes that Dany and her dragons can defeat Cersei. Roose Bolton goes to Winterfell after the Red Wedding to find his son, Ramsay Bolton, in charge. Ramsay took Winterfell from Theon and has tortured him to the extent that he only answers to the name Reek. He is also a sausage down. Ramsay is another Joffrey-type character. Arya and the Hound are found by Lady Brienne, and the two warriors have an epic battle while Arya escapes, as she doesn't fully trust either of them. She boards a ship to Braavos using a phrase that her old friend Jaqen H'ghar had taught her earlier in the story. Maybe he can help her now that she doesn't know where the rest of her family are. The epic battle of Season 4 is the Battle for Castle Black. The wildlings siege the wall with their giant army of men and giants. We see Jon facing his girl Ygritte, as well as Samwell Tarly the Craven finally getting into a real battle. After huge loss for both sides, the remaining army of Stannis Baratheon arrive at Castle Black to force the wildlings to retreat. What an episode. In Season 5, after the battle for Castle Black, the Night's Watch are in need of a new Lord Commander. And who gets the most votes? Only our boy Jon Snow. Although he still doesn't have that many friends in the Watch, as a lot of them feel like he likes the wildlings. Stannis has Mance Rayder, leader of the wildlings, burnt at the stake, and Melisandre even convinced Stannis to sacrifice his own daughter in the name of the Lord of the Light to try and stop the snow that has been causing his troops to suffer. Dad of the Year award definitely does not go to Stannis. Nevertheless, this move doesn't work and causes a lot of his army to lose faith in Stannis as a leader, and is basically one of the final straws in his quest for the throne. Littlefinger leads Sansa to Ramsay Bolton at Winterfell and organises their marriage to try and appease the Northern Lords, as a Stark will be back in Winterfell. Littlefinger knows how vicious Ramsay is, but it doesn't bother him as he only seeks power for himself. Another bad match for Sansa. Not sure they have Tinder in Westeros either. Stannis and the remainder of his army attempt to siege Winterfell in deep snow, but are easily beaten, with Stannis slain by none other than Brienne of Tarth, who has followed Sansa, finally getting sweet, sweet revenge for her beloved Renly, Stannis' brother. Sansa and Ramsay are wed and bad things happen. Theon, aka Reek, and Sansa eventually have enough and resort to jumping off the Winterfell castle into the snow to flee Ramsay's wrath. In King's Landing, Margaery Tyrell has now married Joffrey's younger brother, Tommen, who is now king. There is an uprising of a religious cult led by the High Sparrow. He takes advantage of Tommen's innocence, and the sexual deeds of Cersei are revealed to the public, with the cult forcing her to atone to her sins in the name of the Seven. The Seven are the gods that they worship. Cersei has to do a naked walk of penance through the capital. Shame. Tyrion meets exiled knight Jorah Mormont, who realises that if he brings Daenerys a gift of a Lannister, she may excuse his betrayal and like him again. Like him. Good luck, Jorah, mate. Tyrion also wants to go to Daenerys, so it's a win-win for the duo. Meanwhile, Daenerys and her army of Unsullied have taken over the city of Meereen and freed its people from the city's draconian masters. However, a group of rebels known as the Sons of the Harpy do not take kindly to their new leader. Dany reopens the traditional Meereen fighting pits to appease the locals. Jorah and Tyrion make their way to Dany. Tyrion uses his charm and wit, along with their mutual hatred of the Lannisters, to land a place on her council. Dany exiles Jorah again. Unlucky, mate. Jorah decides to fight in the Meereen pit and ends up saving Dany's life from an assassination attempt by the Sons of the Harpy. The pit is overrun as Drogon, Daenerys' biggest dragon, lands, burns a couple of fools, and flies Dany far, far away. Just her and her dragon. Jon Snow takes a group of the Night's Watch north of the Wall to Hardhome to attempt to negotiate an alliance with the Wildlings. In another insane Game of Thrones moment, the Night King, leader of the White Walkers, has brought his army of the dead and attacks. This is the first time we see the White Walkers in a full-on battle, and oh my god, it was terrifying. The others destroy the living, leaving a haunting final shot of a few men, including Jon Snow, fleeing on rowboats, as thousands and thousands of dead are risen as whites, by order of the Night King. Yeah, they're going to be pretty hard to defeat. Upon returning to the Wall, a bunch of Night's Watch brothers have conspired against their Lord Commander. They deceive Jon Snow and trap him, each stabbing him a single time, while saying, "For the Watch," leaving Jon to bleed out on the floor. What? After much fan speculation between seasons, Jon Snow is brought back to life by Melisandre in Season 6. This is a secret that Kit Harington, who plays Jon Snow, actually told a police officer to get away from a speeding ticket. But anyway, Jon is back, but is not quite the same as he was before he was killed, seeming a little more cold-hearted and determined, but with all the qualities we still loved about Jon. Daenerys is stranded with Drogon, who goes off to catch some sheep or something, so she ventures on her own to try and find civilization, until she is surrounded by a bunch of Dothraki, who are angry at her for deserting their people. She slyly drops her ring before she's captured in hope that someone will find it and eventually help save her. In King's Landing, the High Sparrow continues to manipulate King Tommen while Cersei is on trial, increasing the power of the religious cult. Whereas in Braavos, Arya has finished some trials at the House of Black and White to become a faceless assassin herself, just like Jack and Hagar. Arya travels back to Westeros to the twins, assuming the identity of a servant girl, as she now can. She kills 2 of Walder Frey's sons before cooking them in a pie that she serves to the old geezer. After revealing her true identity to Walder, she cuts his throat, avenging Robb and Catelyn. Sweet, sweet justice. Sansa and Theon are captured by Ramsay's soldiers outside Winterfell, but Lady Brienne arrives in time to rescue them. This time, Sansa accepts Brienne's loyalty. While Theon travels back to the Iron Islands to his sister Yara, Sansa goes to Castle Black to her brother Jon Snow, just as he's resigned as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. They receive a letter from Ramsay saying that he has the youngest Stark brother Rickon as his prisoner. Sansa tells Jon of the horrible torture that Ramsay is capable of, and they decide to attack Winterfell, to save Rickon and to take back their home in one of the greatest battles in TV and movie history, the Battle of the Bastards. But before that, Bran Stark learns of how the White Walkers were initially made and carries on training to become the Three-Eyed Raven, a seer who can see through time, and someone he learns that he's destined to be. During one of Bran's visions, the Night King somehow notices him and interferes with the vision. We still don't know how the Night King did this. The Night King now knows where Bran is and sends some of his dead whites to attack. Bran, still in the vision, is carried out of the cave where they're staying in, and we learn how Hodor got his name, as he sacrifices himself to allow Bran to escape. Hold the door! Now back to the Battle of the Bastards. Jon's army of Northmen and Wildlings attack Winterfell and the Boltons after Ramsay toys with and shoots Rickon Stark with an arrow. The battle is bloody, brutal, and epic. The Boltons get the upper hand, however, when they circle around Jon's army, trapping them in and leaving them in an impossible situation. Luckily for them, however, Sansa had written to Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale for help, who arrive right at the perfect time and wipe out the remaining Bolton army. Jon chases Ramsay towards Winterfell and assaults him with no emotion. Well deserved though, Ramsay, you Ramsay is locked in the kennels when Sansa gives him a visit and watches as his vicious dogs eat him alive. The Starks are finally back in Winterfell. Towards the end of Season 6, one of the biggest fan theories finally gets a payoff. Bran is in one of his visions when he is following a young Ned Stark up a tower to find Lyanna Stark, Ned's sister, giving birth to Rhaegar Targaryen's son. She makes Ned promise to look after the child. We know that this child is Jon Snow, Ned's fake bastard son, which is huge as Jon is actually a Targaryen. All you R+L=J theorists were right. Daenerys returns to Meereen after using her charm to convince the Dothraki that she's in fact special and a worthy queen. And also by setting fire to the wooden Dothraki temple, killing all the Khals and everyone inside, but walking out unharmed herself. That kind of persuaded them too. In King's Landing, Cersei has had enough of the High Sparrow and his cult, so takes matters into her own hands. She uses the remaining wildfire from the Battle of Blackwater Bay in Season 2 to blow up the Great Sept, killing hundreds, including the High Sparrow and Marjorie Tyrell. In King Tommen's grief, he jumps from the window in his tower to his death. Cersei takes up the position of Queen Regent of the Seven Kingdoms as winter is drawing in. Before we go on to Season 7, if you have enjoyed this video so far, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button and subscribe for more Game of Thrones videos. Thank you very much. Alright, Season 7. Winter has arrived as Daenerys finally steps foot on the ground of Westeros, when she lands in Dragonstone, the ancient Targaryen stronghold. She now has the army of the Unsullied, Dothraki, and 3 fully grown dragons behind her. Naturally, she quickly makes important alliances with Westerosi lords and highborns, with Tyrion acting as Hand of the Queen. Her advisors tell her that she should invite the King in the North, Jon Snow, down to meet. Jon accepts as he wants to go to Dragonstone anyway, as his friend Sam Tarly of the Night's Watch has learnt in the Citadel Library that the material known as dragonglass can be used in weapons to kill the White Walkers. Luckily enough, Dragonstone is built on a great heap of the stuff. Daenerys basically demands Jon to kneel and pledge his, and the North's, allegiance in her. He refuses, saying that they need to work together to fight the army of the dead. The throne and politics that surround it can wait, or they'll all be dead. Dany and Jon don't seem to get on at first, but perhaps a turning point is when one of Dany's dragons, Drogon, approaches Jon and allows the King in the North to pet him. Again, hinting at Jon Snow's true Targaryen heritage. Daenerys and her allies come up with a plan to take Cersei down with multiple sieges, while Jon decides to lead a group north of the wall to try and capture a White and bring it back south to convince Daenerys, and possibly even Cersei, of the threat that they're under. Bran Stark makes it back to Winterfell to see his sister Sansa in charge. However, Bran is no longer the same boy that left Winterfell. He is now the all-seeing, three-eyed raven, and seems to have lost most of his emotions as a human. Arya also makes it back to Winterfell after her journeys. 3 Starks in Winterfell for the first time in what feels like ever. Littlefinger is also at Winterfell, scheming away, and tries to push Sansa and Arya apart. The two realise that they need to stick together, and with Bran's help and knowledge, Littlefinger comes to his sorry end. Good riddance. Theon Greyjoy's uncle, Euron, goes to King's Landing to offer his hand in marriage to Queen Cersei. Euron is a ruthless sea captain who basically hates everyone, a bit like Cersei really. She tells him he must prove his worth, and he consequently destroys one of Daenerys' squad's advances at sea. Meanwhile, the Lannister army led by Jaime has just taken Highgarden, the home of the Tyrell family. This is after Olenna Tyrell, Marjorie's grandmother, pledged the family's allegiance to Daenerys. The Lannisters won the battle easily, taking their supplies for the forthcoming winter. However, Jaime and Olenna have an interesting conversation after the battle, as Jaime allows her to poison herself instead of being slain. Olenna reveals that it was her who poisoned King Joffrey way back in Season 4. And with an air horn sound and a dab, she passed away. Another battle erupts in Highgarden between the Dothraki and Lannister forces, just as the Lannisters are leaving with their spoils. However, this time, the Lannisters have a real challenge. The Dothraki massively outnumber them, and Daenerys turns up on her massive dragon. Unreal. Much of the Lannister forces are wiped out. However, Drogon the dragon is injured, and Dany has to dismount. Jaime sees his opportunity to take Dany out and rides towards her. Drogon turns at the last second and sends fire his way. As the hot gas almost takes Jaime out, Bronn saves him by tackling him out of the way. Close call all round, really. And yet another incredible battle episode of Game of Thrones. Jon Snow is now north of the Wall with his band of merry men when they get trapped on a frozen lake, surrounded by White Walkers and the army of the dead. The Night King looks on ominously, knowing that he can wait patiently for Jon and his friends to die. Luckily for them, however, Daenerys turns up with her dragons and helps Jon and the crew escape, taking out a load of the dead as well. The Night King proves that he could be an Olympic champion as he throws an ice spear into the heart of one of Dany's dragons. The dragon can't be saved and our heroes escape on Drogon's back after capturing one of the dead. This episode ends as the others haul the dead dragon's body out of the lake. The Night King eerily resurrects Viserion the dragon, turning him into an ice dragon with the same light blue eyes as the White Walkers. So now the Night King has a dragon too. Great. Jon and Daenerys, along with a few others, travel to King's Landing to show Cersei the white. Although she's obviously scared, Cersei refuses to make an alliance. Tyrion speaks to Cersei in private, apparently persuading her to ally with the rival monarchs. However, she later reveals to Jaime that she intends for her enemies to wipe each other out before attacking the victor. Sneaky. She also sends Euron to Essos to transport the Golden Company to Westeros, who will hopefully help her in the wars to come. Disgusted by Cersei's selfishness and short-sightedness, Jaime finally abandons her side and goes north on his own, leaving Cersei alone. On the boat back up north, Jon and Daenerys get intimate. Something that is kind of cool with them being two of the most powerful and likeable characters in the show, but is also very weird as we, the viewers, know that they're related. That's going to be a big shock for the two in the final season. Season 7 ends as the White Walkers take down the Wall with the help of their new Ice Dragon. The Night's Watch and the wildlings defending the Wall had no chance, and the army of the dead marches into the 7 kingdoms of Westeros. Winter has come. And there we have it, a brief, quote-unquote, because it was quite long, synopsis of Game of Thrones. I'm sure you're all as hyped as me for Season 8. This video took a long time to put together, so I would wholeheartedly appreciate it if you could leave a like and comment below why you love Game of Thrones, and maybe even your favourite scene so far. Check out some of my other Game of Thrones videos, there's some good theory ones in there, and subscribe for when Season 8 comes out, because you bet I'll be straight on making videos for that. Again, thank you very much, and I'll see you all on another video.